Good afternoon, friends. I had to look at my clock. I am getting a little bit of a late start today, so I have to split this video into 2 days. So I absolutely have to get a whole gallon of cream turned into cream cheese today. But I have a lot of things I need to get done later today outside the house. So what I'm going to do is show you how to turn raw cream. Okay, so this is like fresh from the cow, unpasteurized cream into cream cheese. If you don't have access to raw cream, I will have a video later on how to turn whole pasteurized milk into cream cheese and into yogurt. So let's get started on turning this into cream cheese. We are first going to start off with a nice big pot. This is a heavy bottom pot, and I'm going to put the cream in the pot. I also want to reserve a little bit of cream. There's a little bit of cream on the bottom of that to add back into the cream cheese to make it creamy. Second one for a full gallon. I'm going to hold back just a tiniest bit of cream this time around. Put my hand here and you can see how little there is. Now I'm going to turn my stove on to about medium high. This is raw cream, but in order to turn it into things like yogurt, cheese, sour cream, cream cheese, you have to heat the milk. You have to heat the cream. So while we are waiting for the cream to come up to temperature, I got some 5x7 parchment pieces from Temu, and then I took one of my, I love these little things, these little micro mini bread trays, and I turned it upside down, and I set my parchment paper on top, and then I cut the 4 corners. Then once I cut the 4 corners, I can take that parchment paper and set it down inside of these trays. And that way you don't have a crinkled paper in there making it look less than pretty. You also are going to need a very, very clean or a sterilized measuring device, because we're going to put lemon juice inside that cream and it's going to curdle. So we don't want to introduce any kind of new kinds of bacteria into that cream. And then we're just going to put a lid on it and let it just do its business. So the cream is almost to temp. I'll bring you over there as soon as it hits it. All right, we've just about reached 180. Yep, we are there. So we're going to turn the stove off. We're going to take this pot over onto the counter. Now we are going to take 3/4 of a cup. So this is a 1/4 cup. I'm hoping I have enough lemon juice for this. Worst case, I have to put a little bit of vinegar in, but we'll start with the lemon juice. There's one. There's 2. I'm going to have to add 1 of vinegar. We will give this a little stir. It's going to start curdling real quick. So we're going to stir all of this acid into the cream. And it's already starting to curdle. As you can see, it's already starting to. I just want to make sure all of the acid is thoroughly mixed in. And it's not like I'm adding rennet, so it's not going to hurt to overmix this. You add rennet and you just want to leave it alone because you just want it to develop a nice solid curd on top. This won't get hard because there's no rennet in it. Okay. Now I'm going to put the lid on this. And we're going to leave it alone for at least an hour. This takes time. Don't stir it, don't bug it, don't jiggle it, don't do anything. Leave it alone for an hour. As it cools, it will curdle even more. All right, so it's been sitting for almost an hour. Take the lid off and let's check this out. I'm going to show you. It is really nice and curdled. So I'm going to take a slotted spoon and a fine mesh sieve. You can also use cheesecloth. We're going to grab some of this cheese. And we'll ladle it in real gentle. Okay, so you want to be really gentle with this. You don't want to break up the curds or anything. You just want this to naturally drain. So let me get this all scooped up, and then I'll show you the next step when we reach that. I ended up needing to create a second one, so this one is just in the mesh sieve. This one I did use a tea towel because my strainer has a little bit larger holes. So this is going to naturally, quietly drain for 10 minutes. And then we will see how the texture is. We're going to put it into a bowl, probably into the one that's in this one, and then we will check the texture, mix it up, and if we need to add any cream back into it, that's when we're going to add the cream in, and then they're going to go into their trays. All right, so they've now been resting for 10 minutes. So I'm going to take this and I am going to put it in another bowl. Hold on here. I'll just grab my pot and let it sit here for a minute while I empty the jar or the bowl of whey into jar. And we can use this for anything we want. Chances are these are going to go to some pigs. Does not matter if there's a little bit of whey in there. Take the cream cheese and plop it in. Next is this little here. Now with a tea towel, it's going to hold a little bit more moisture than if you just use a metal sieve. So let's see if I can get this in here without making a huge mess. That's why I like the sieve. This has some extra whey. I might run this into the sieve real quick. Because I do believe my bowl was not quite deep enough to let it completely drain. Now, you have to make sure you don't scrape the bottom of your pot. I'll show you why. Because some pieces will actually burn, so that'll go to the piggies. I do believe this needs to drain some more. Looks like I need to drain this a little bit more, so we'll be back as soon as this is done draining. Looks like it should have drained enough. I don't want it super dry. You don't want these curds really dry. Dump that last bit in there. We ended up with almost a half a gallon of whey for the pigs. Find me a lid. I'm going to use my spoon that I scooped out that burnt piece out. This will go to the pigs. Now we have some wonderful curds, and so now what we're going to do, these look really nice and moist. We're going to take our tray and we're going to ladle this in, and we're going to put it in, and then we're going to press them down so it's nice and snug. But again, I don't want to grab a lot of what's left in the whey that's down there. Grab more of the curds. Now, if you want to sweeten this and add sugar to it, you totally can. I am not going to do that. Press it down where it's into the corners. You're probably going to get a little bit more drainage as these cure. This is why you don't want to like scoop from the very bottom and get up all that whey that's still left. So I ended up with 5 of these, and each one weighs 12 ounces. So that's not bad at all. So I can't do the math on this as in raw cream because this came from a cow, from a friend who pays to have his, take care of his cow. So I can't give you a cost on this, but I am going to do one on whole milk from the grocery store, and I will let you know how much I end up with and what the cost was, whether it's cheaper to make it or cheaper to buy it. So next, we're going to wrap them up in plastic wrap. You can also use beeswax wrap. I don't have any, so I'm using plastic wrap. And what I'm going to do is offset it, roll it all the way around, and then I'm going to pat this down to touch the cream cheese. This helps it not develop a skin. And then this will go in the fridge. This will now rest in the fridge for 24 hours, maybe a little bit longer depending upon how warm the curds are when you put them into the fridge. But wait 24 hours, then this should solidify, and then you'll be able to use it just like as you used Philadelphia cream cheese. It will keep in the fridge for up to a month. If you freeze it, you can still use it for baked goods, but it changes texture just like if you were to freeze Philadelphia cream cheese. Changes the texture and it's not good for dip. But this, just like this, great for dip. And now we're going to move on to our next recipe. Oh, good morning, friends. Gotta have my coffee. Today is the next day after making that cream cheese, and today I have a few items that I want to get done off of my list. One, I want to turn the rest of my Nancy's yogurt into more yogurt. So I have a little over a half a gallon of whole milk. I'm going to use my Instant Pot to make that, and I'll show you how I do that. I also want to process, I just got 5 pounds of potatoes, but I want to process them so they don't go bad. And dinner tonight is going to be sweet and sour meatballs with rice. And I'll show you how I make the sweet and sour sauce. You can buy pre-made meatballs. I just buy ground beef. Put some, you can put arrowroot powder, cornmeal, flour, whatever you want to make a binding agent for your meatballs. So let's get started on the yogurt. So I have my Instapot here plugged in. This is actually Chef's Mate. And I am going to put it on saute and start. Put my whole milk in here, and I want to get the temperature up to around 85 degrees. Because this is already pasteurized, I only have to go up to 85. If you're working with raw milk, if you want all of the benefits of the raw milk, again, go only to 85. If you want to ensure that only the probiotics within your yogurt are inoculated, make sure that you sterilize or pasteurize your raw milk. Take it up to 180 degrees. Grab my thermometer. I'm actually going to use a wooden chopstick to stir. And when I get to 85 degrees, we will cool it off and add our culture so that it can culture, and then I'll show you the next part. All right, so now we are at 90 degrees. So I'm going to turn it off. And we're going to let this cool down to around 77 degrees, maybe a little bit cooler. So let's move on to processing those potatoes. So I only have 5 pounds of potatoes, so it's not a lot, but they do need to be washed a little bit. And I'm going to shred some into hash browns and turn them into hash brown patties. And some of them I'm going to make into O'Brien's. And I'm just going to flash freeze the potatoes. I'm going to blanch them and then flash freeze them. And then I'll add my peppers and onions later on. So one of the important things with potatoes, if you're going to preserve them at home, is you must wash the starch off and blanch them before you freeze them, or they're going to turn brown. I'm going to grab my potato peeler. I already have 2 pots of water on to boil because some of these are going to be O'Brien potatoes and some of them are going to be hash browns that I can later turn into patties if I choose. I am choosing to peel my potatoes. You don't have to. So the water is really cloudy, so now I need to make sure I will rinse this until the water is clear. Now the water is nice and clear. I'm going to scoop them out and put them into the hot water to blanch for 5 minutes. Set my timer, and I'm just going to keep right on going. Do them in sections so that you don't overload the pot so that the water doesn't cool down a whole lot. And then I'll show you what happens after they come out of the blanch. The potatoes are done blanching, so I will take a spider and drain off the excess water, and then I'm going to spread it on a paper towel. You can actually use a parchment lined paper, but you don't want to leave it on the paper towel for very long. So we just want to spread it out, dry it off, and right away get it onto a parchment lined paper, and then put it in the freezer. That's why you want to do it in stages, because you don't want to overwhelm your freezer with a lot of hot stuff. All right, so now this can go back onto the stove. Get another paper towel. And we'll pat as much of the moisture off. Roll this onto a piece of parchment paper. See how much I got left in there. Just a little bit. Dry off your cake sheet or your sheet that you're going to put your parchment paper on. And then you're going to put this in the freezer until they're frozen, and then you can bag them up. The milk is now cool to a nice temperature, so we're going to take our culture, which we're using Nancy's. Has a little bit of separation. I don't know if you can see that, but that's okay. Stir that back in. And because I want this to really set, I'm probably going to put all of it in here. It won't hurt to put too much. It only hurts if you put too little. Typically, it's 3/4 of a cup for every gallon of milk. And remember, I'm doing a little over a half. And yeah, I'm putting probably 4 cups, 3 cups of yogurt in there. Give it a nice stir. I'm going to put this in my Instant Pot. Put the lid on. Put it on exhaust, and I'm going to hit my yogurt button right here. You can have an option of how late you or how long you want to do it. I'm going to start with 12 hours, and we'll see how we like it at 12 hours. We can always add more time in, and you can't take the time away. Now time for the hash browns. All the potatoes are peeled, and they're sitting in water so they don't turn brown. And I'm going to use my shredder Now I'm going to rinse these off and throw them in the blancher, for they only need like 3 minutes. Rinsed off. They're like a fine hash brown. They're really nice. So now put it into my pot to cook for about 3 minutes. For the hash browns, we don't want to lay them out on the paper towel. It'll be too hard to pick them up. So we're going to use a strainer and a bowl. and a fine mesh sieve to grab the hash browns. Okay, we're ready for our next round. Well, it is 1 a.m. It is completely ready, so it is ready to go into containers. So I'm going to scoop them into the containers. So I ended up with 3, I think these are 32 ounce. So 3 32-ounce containers, one of them, and a fourth one that's a little over a half. Now you see it's still a little loose because these things are about 100 degrees. So I'm going to put the lids on them, put them in the fridge, and we'll see you in the morning. Time for the sweet and sour meatballs. So in Rea Drummonds Dinner Time, here is the sweet and sour ingredients. So we're going to make this. It sounds so good. First off, we got to start cooking the rice. So let me tell you what the ingredients are and how much of each one. Now I'm not going to do a full recipe of this. It's just my husband and I, so we don't need a whole lot. So I'm taking 2 hamburger patties and we're going to turn those into meatballs. So for the full recipe, this is how it sounds. It's 2 1/4 cups of pineapple juice, 1 1/2 cups of packed brown sugar, 1/2 cup of rice wine vinegar or white vinegar, 1/4 cup of ketchup, 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, 1 tablespoon of cornstarch, and she's using a bag of pre-frozen meatballs, and you can totally do that. So if you have pre-made frozen meatballs, I do have some in my freezer and I'm going to include those, but they're going to taste a little different. But you can totally use pre-packaged meatballs. But I really want to make homemade meatballs that are specifically meant to be in sweet and sour sauce, and it only takes 1 ingredient for the spices part of it. Anyways, 1 tablespoon of sriracha or some other hot sauce. I'm going to omit that. I might put some cayenne powder in there, but I'm still thinking about it. 1 cup of drained, canned, or fresh pineapple chunks. 4 tablespoons of sliced green onions. And then, of course, 1 1/2 cups of rice. I keep my rice in bulk. We also have some in our fridge that I think needs to get used, but I want fresh. So we're going to start with the rice first because that takes like 20 minutes for it to cook. So I'm not going to show you that process. Everybody knows how to cook rice, whether you cook it on the stove or you do a rice cooker or an Instant Pot. Just cook your rice. I'll be back to show you how I make the meatballs. Okay, I'm going to start off with cutting my green onions because mine are not cut. And we only need 4 tablespoons. So we don't need much. I'm going to give these a wash. And then dice them up. Or slice them up. And since I don't need much, I'm probably going to do 1. The rest will go in back into my fridge. Give this a little rinse. And I'm actually going to use this whole thing. I'm not going to waste any of it. So even if it's more than 4 tablespoons, it goes into the pot. put this in a little bowl. I will need this cutting board. All right, so I need to open my can of pineapples. Pour the juice in, but not the pineapples. So you're going to want 2 cups if you want a full recipe. So now we need to add the brown sugar, the vinegar, ketchup, and soy sauce. So because I'm not following a full recipe, let me see how much I have. I have a cup. We'll see how much pineapple sauce I actually have. Pineapple juice. Okay, so I have about a cup. So I'm going to divide this in half. So I want a 1/4 cup of brown sugar. What do I have here? I think this is a half. So 1/4 cup. I don't pre-make brown sugar. It's not worth it. Not worth my time to put it in a container. I just have molasses and regular sugar. So I will grab a spoon, and this way I can make it as brown sugary as I choose. And I love the taste of molasses. So for me it ends up being a dark brown sugar. Dissolve that sugar in there. We're going to put it on the stove. Put this away. Next is rice wine vinegar. It says a 1/2 cup. I'm doing a 1/4 cup. I have measurements on the outside of my cup. I'm going to do a 1/4 cup. And 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. And I'm going to measure that with my heart. And ketchup. And I need 1/4 cup of ketchup. So half of that would be an 1/8. That's close enough. And then I'm going to put this on the stove and I'm going to warm it up. And it'll all just marry together. Now we're going to make the meatballs. Grab me a bowl. I'm going to put my pieces of hamburger meat in there. Grab a couple of gloves. If you know me, you know I don't like to touch this stuff. Okay, rinsed off my gloves. I'm going to put in some breadcrumbs. And the amount you put in just depends on when it comes together. A little bit of salt, not much. 1 egg. And a little bit of Chinese 5 spice. This is the reason why I wanted to use fresh meat and not prepackaged. So sprinkle some in there, probably like a 1/4 teaspoon. See? All right, now I'm going to mix this all together. And if I need more breadcrumbs, I will be able to put them in. Now, if you just want to use Italian meatballs, you can. The Italian flavor will come through the sweet and sour. Just why I like to stay within the Asian flavors for Asian meals. Looks like I need a little bit more breadcrumbs. You could use panko too. This is what I got at a salvage store, so I think it was like 49 cents for this full container. Okay, in a small skillet, I'm going to make meatballs and put them right into the skillet so they cook. Here is my skillet. No need to add any grease or anything to it because your meatballs will make plenty on their own. Now, the size becomes your preference. I'm not going to tell you how big or how little to make them. I want them bite size. Know that there's a bit of a shrinkage, so I'm making adjustments for shrinkage. That's about how big my meatball's going to be. Right into the skillet. All right, so the meatballs are in the skillet. I need to whisk the sauce. Everything smells so good. take a spoon and flip the ones that I put in here early. Almost thought about putting chunks of pineapple inside of each meatball. That would be so good. I gotta do that next time. This is why making your own meatballs, you can customize it. Okay. Turn them over, and then I'm gonna put a lid on so they all cook completely. When I'm all browned on both sides, because that's where the flavor is. Okay, grab me a lid. Keep the heat in there. I'm going to turn it down just a touch. So now we're almost ready to move to the next step on the sauce. The little bit of pineapple sauce or pineapple juice that's left, I'm going to mix up a little bit of a slurry with some cornstarch. You can use arrowroot, potato powder, anything you want. Whisk this cornstarch in here. You don't want any clumps. Make sure you whisk it really well. I think I want it just a little bit more in there. Now we're going to pour this into the sauce. Okay, right into the sauce it goes. Whisk it in. And we're going to let it thicken. Okay, so it is now time to add pineapples into this. Because I opened the whole can, I'm putting the whole can in. Give it a little bit of a stir there. I want the pineapples to heat up. Then we're going to add the meatballs in and let this thicken. Okay. Meatballs are done. If you use pre-cooked, you can actually skip cooking them. You can just put them in when your sauce is boiling, lightly boiling. So I'm going to add my meatballs in. I'm so hungry. It's the reason why I started this. Whew. Beginning to end, I think this took maybe 15 minutes. And that included making the meatballs. So if you bought the meatballs, it would take even less time. now you're going to stir it in, coat all the meatballs. I'm going to let this cook down just a little bit, and then we will serve this up. It looks so good. Add the green onions in. Let them cook and marinate a little bit. All right, rice are in the bowl. Here is our meatballs, sweet and sour. Gotta serve up some pineapples. And a little bit of that sauce. All right, doesn't that look good? Oh my goodness. I'm so excited about this. So take a little bit of the meatball, a little bit of rice, and a little bit of the pineapple. I don't know if I can cut the pineapple, but everything in one bite. Yeah. Make the meatballs and use the Chinese 5-spice. That, wow, that is incredible. That is so good. I am super hungry, so this is my lunch. I thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell so you get notified when I upload one of these videos. Bon appetit.